Hey guys, so in this lecture what we are going to cover is a unique thing, which is a game built out of ReactJS. Now that we have covered enough ground on ReactJS, seeing all the components, all the integrities that we have gone through with smaller examples all throughout. How about building a full-fledged example? Yes, and as you can see it on the screen right now up out here, that we have created a game. Let me refresh the screen so you can see some animation too. All it does, it provides you two random numbers, which is 34 and 27, and then ask you a sum of it. And if you select the correct answer, you probably get a success screen. If you don't select the correct answer, let's say you select 55, which is again a correct answer in this scenario, 74, it's a wrong answer, you get the wrong screen, and it asks users to play again. So the moment the user plays again, they'll be presented with a new question. Easy, right? Very easy. It looks very easy, and it is very easy with React as well. So just we need to make sure that we understand how we build up each and every component, what data gets passed to what component, and little bit details here and there on how you can access things. Just one thing before we get started, we are not going to have any code that we have used so far. We'll create a fresh application. The only thing that I will provide you in this lecture is the CSS file. The rest of it we will create from scratch, which means writing our first div to the entire play again game module. Now, of course, at the end of the whole game development, I will also give you one small task, and let's see who can crack that up. But for now, don't worry about the task. Let's get started with the development. So as you can see, we have a clean slate out here. We have nothing created. The code base is all empty. And of course, I just have an end folder in this one because we're creating everything from scratch. So there's nothing out here. I'm going to create the first thing, which is create React app. And let's call this app as game. I know that's very fascinating, right? Well, I just want it to be very simple. If you have any other name, go ahead and give that name. So let's call this, it will start creating everything for us. And we'll just give it a second for it to get started. Now remember, I'm not going to be doing anything fascinating. It's all what we have learned. And of course, I'll be sharing the CSS files with you so you can go and check out in the resources up there. And if you already have the resources, go ahead and do it with me. And if you have any issues, of course, hit me up in the Q&A section. I just wanted to utilize this time when the installation happens so that I can pass on any messages that may be there. Now I think the installation is kind of done. And it installed so many things. Fantastic. Okay, now it's installed. Let's just go quickly into cd game so that we are in the folder. Let me just clear the console, and you can clear the console using command K if you're using a Mac. And let me just do npm start. Okay, I also have the Sublime text open. Let me see if the code got generated. Yes, it is. So I have everything in here. The blank slate gets created. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and copy some CSS files out here so that I have all the code necessary checked in. So I'm not doing anything fascinating, just a couple of CSS classes and styling in there. Okay, now let's go to the app.js where we start our coding. Let's close this. Instead of to get started, let's just create a, let's say, quiz component. Now when we create a quiz component, we need to make sure we import a quiz component. So you do a quiz from dot quiz. Now you will say, I don't even have dot quiz file created. Yes, and that's what even React will yell for. So let's just go and create that dot quiz file. So in the source, let's just create this new file called quiz.js. Let's save it in the same location, and let's make sure we have import React. Let me close this. React from React. Fantastic. Now let's just go and create this. So class quiz extends component. Again, I don't have the component defined yet, so let me just do that. So I'll just do a comma component. Okay, so I have the React quiz class created. I of course need to make sure I do a render out here, so render something. For now I'll just return a div with the class name equals quiz. That's all. And again, this is all the CSS I have already provided, so it should work. Let's just save this and let's make sure we do an export. So export default quiz. Okay, now it should start showing you a small line on the top because we don't have anything coded in yet. So that's the first thing that we are going to see. The next thing we will say is let's add one more div in this, which is div class name is equals to quiz content, and the div gets completed. So now we have one more CSS class added, which is div content. So now that we have the divs created, let's just quickly write our first question, which is what is the sum of, let's say 5 and 5 question mark, and then let's start giving some data. Now I have already created some of the content here, so you can just expect this to be small classes, which CSS classes which is already there, which should start giving it. Let's save it and see if this reflects correctly, and it should display the question. Now let's just add the CSS class which is text info to it. So let's just add a span here, so at least we can see a different color out here. So class name is equals to text info, and I'll quickly show you what this text info does. Span, let me just copy this, copy it here, and then close it out here, span. Okay, now I'll just show you what span text info does, which is out here somewhere. Yes, so it just increases the font size, it changes the color a bit, and it also adds some boldness to it. Let's save this and we should start seeing an updated version here. I know that's too big, but we will fix that. So let's also fix this by adding a p tag, and class name is equals to question. So this is just a standard CSS I've added where I just increase the font of this entire thing completely. Let me just close the p tag and save it. So you should see the entire font changes, and now we have our question ready. Now how do we create the fields, or how do we create the question or options that we have? So I have a CSS class which is div class name is equals to field. I think it's field or fields. Let me check. It is fields. Okay, let's add that as fields. Let's do a div, and in the options there's something called as a div class name is equals to, I think it's field block. Let me just double check. It's field block, that's right. And I close the div again, and in there I'll just pass in the content as 10. Let's save this. It should display me 10. Fantastic. Now let's copy this and paste this. So we have our skeleton in place. It should all say 10 for now, but we will fix that soon. Now let's quickly also add our button out there at the bottom. So the way we add the button is, of course, let's give the class name. I think it was play again. Let's close this div. So we have a class. Now let's write the button. So a class name equals to button, and let's write what we need in the class name. Let's say play again. Let's close the a tag, save it, and we should start seeing the anchor in the bottom. So you see the play again button as well. Okay, I think I remember why this is not showing up as separate components, because I had another div which is class name equals options. I think that's what it gave it the flex property. So div, closing it, and let me just copy all the options and put it in the options div. Let's save it, and now all the options should hopefully come in the same line. Fantastic. So our skeleton is pretty much ready. So the CSS was always in place. All I did was added my HTML to it. Now my code looks good. Now comes the question of how we generate things randomly and how do we compute things. So I'll see you in the next class where we continue our discussion on the topic. Hey guys, so now that we have the skeleton and the HTML in place, let's try to tweak it a little and try to make sure that we have something coming in from an object. So this hard-coded 10, 10, 5 doesn't make sense. So let's try to make sure we try to make it a little more dynamic and probably have the skeleton or probably split up some things. Like if you see this 10, 10, 10, these are like options. So this is a repeatable component. And as per the principle that we started with, you try to break down to the minimum component possible so that you can reuse. So if I can just break this down as an option to a smaller component, I can probably reuse it again and again, which is 4 times, so that I don't have to write the same line of code again and again. Now, how do I do that? We'll see that in this session. Now, I haven't made any changes except I added a small logo out here for the Slack community that all my students come on to. So you can also sign up and you can also pretty much be there, be a part of the community and ask me any questions out there if you want to. Okay. Now, so let's get started with the code. I have the quiz.js where I have all the 4 options created. I have the 5 and the 5. Now let's try to create it dynamically. So the first thing that comes to mind is you need to initialize it. So you write a constructor. Now in the constructor, what we can do is we can write a small object called riddle. Let's say let riddle is equals to an empty object for now. Okay. And then you set the state as riddle. And of course, if you're using ES6, you don't have to do riddle colon riddle. So doing riddle colon riddle is as good as doing just riddle. So it will still work. Okay. So you can just do a riddle and it should work. Now it doesn't pass in anything yet. So we need to make sure that we come up with an idea. So if you can see that any question will have 4 different options, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which means this can be a repetitive thing or probably an array. So let's try to do that. So let's say results, array, and let's give it options. Let's say 8, 9, 10, and 11, just for this example. Then we also have 2 fields, which is the first field, which is 5, and the second field, which is 5 again. So let's say we give them a name as field 1, as 5, field 2 on the new line as 5 again. And of course, we need to know what is the correct answer. So in this scenario, answer will be 10. Because we need to compare something with the answer or whatever the field's total is going to be. Nothing changes here. Now let's try to do this dynamically. So first of all, to break this into a smaller component, more than that, let's just generate this dynamically by looping in the results array. And how do we do that? Well, the answer is very simple. We can use the JavaScript .map for the array. So let's say I will go here and say add a new method, say this dot render options. Okay, now this is a new method that I will be creating, so I need to make sure that I bind it. So this dot render options is equals to this dot render options dot bind this. Now that I have bound it, it will fail again because I haven't defined the options yet. So let's do that. Let's make sure we write a return. And now let's just copy and paste this out here so that the same code can be reflected and nothing changes yet. Let's save this, wait for the screen to refresh, and you can see nothing changes and everything is displayed as is. So all you did was you remove the view, which is the rendering of these options, into a small method. Now what we can also do is we can move this into a smaller component. So let's try to do that. So let's do a quiz options, new file, quiz options.js. Let's just save this file. And again, this is as good as import. Let me just close this first. Let's say import React. Of course, this is going to be a component. So let's make sure we have the component as well from React. Step 1 done. Now let's go down and say class quiz options extends component. This is very basic, so every time you create a component you need to do that. So now that we have that, let's make sure we have a render method, because every component needs to make sure that there is some kind of a rendering happening. Let's have the return, and let's just make sure that we export the file. So let's say export quiz options, export default quiz options. Okay, so now I'm not rendering anything yet, so let me just copy this entire line, which is this one, and put it out here. Okay, let's save this and let's make sure we import quiz options here. So import quiz options from quiz options. Okay, so now I've imported the quiz options, and instead of this I can just pass quiz options 4 times. Let's say quiz options. Let me just do it once, so let's make sure that we're getting it from that component. Yes, fantastic. Now let's just do this 4 times. Let me just copy this, 1, 2 and 3. So I have 3 more options added, so everything is now coming from my child component. Easy, right? So let me just take a pause here and I will explain you what I just did. So to start with, we knew that this can be reused. Every component can be reused. So what we did was we tried to put it into a separate component. Now how do we do that? First thing we did was we just added a small method here, or a function, and moved everything into the function. So we can at least separate our prime or quiz rendering logic from the options logic. Now before even creating the child component. Once we did that, we knew that it works. After that, we added the new child component, which is quiz options. And once we added the quiz options, we just moved the div in here. So nothing fancy yet, nothing dynamic, but you see where we are going. All we need to pass is a small property with the number, and the quiz option will start displaying that number. Very easy. Remember the way we have done it in the past? And of course, we also created a small riddle object which will hold the results array, because we need 4 options and we need to loop through them. We also have 2 fields, which is the questions 5 and 5, and we have an answer. Of course, we need to compare the answer on whatever is the answer. And then we also bind the render options. So that's all we've done in this lecture. I hope it makes sense, and we will pick it up from this in the next video.